Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Vaishnava Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Vangsha Jayate. Om Hri Om. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you for this live stream satsangha, and this is sponsored by the International Sanatana Dharma Society, otherwise known as the ISDS for short. The International Sanatana Dharma Society is a very unique organization, and I use the word organization very, very loosely. You cannot accomplish anything in this world, even spiritually, unless you have some sort of organization. The ISDS, however, is quite different from other organizations on the planet, in that, first of all, it is a movement. It is a non-profit religious organization. It's not a business. It's not something that exists in order to simply make money for its own sake or to put in someone's pocket, etc., etc. Rather, this is an idealistic movement, like communism, like nationalism, like any other ism that you can think of that is based upon any sort of idealism, whether good or bad historically. But in the same way that you have had historically groupings of people, cadres of individuals who come together around a common idea, a common vision about the future. In the same way that you had this historically, this is what the International Sanatana Dharma Society is. It is a movement based upon a philosophy, and a philosophy that itself is geared toward changing the face of the earth, and for the better, for the better. This is what the International Sanatana Dharma Society is, and that is the organization, the movement, that is sponsoring what you're seeing tonight. So again, what this is and what we do is radically different from almost anything else that you'll find, certainly on the internet. We pre-existed the internet. Sanatana Dharma pre-existed everything, one could say, but even our specific movement pre-existed the internet. But this is the movement that is sponsoring precisely what you are seeing. And before we jump into the talk for today, which will be a continuation of the talk that we did last time on the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, first I just want to say that as a movement, again, as a movement that is geared toward changing the face of the earth, of course, we also have members, we have donors, we have volunteers. Indeed, we have so many dozens and dozens and dozens of volunteers now. I have conversations about this all the time now with many of my leading students about how, if anything, it's almost a struggle to organize them all. We have so many, and in so many dozens of nations throughout the world. But as is true for any movement, we need help. We need as much help as possible to run this movement. So thus, for the next 2 weeks, so starting really officially today, but really it started yesterday, and up until the 14th of August, we are having a membership drive for the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And hopefully, sooner rather than later, one of our moderators will have the link for how to become a member. And I want to encourage everyone who is watching today. I know that only a minority of people who actually watch the live stream are members, and that's always the situation. That's always the case. You know, not everyone can financially support any sort of movement, even if they very much believe in it, actually. And especially today, we know that people have all sorts of economic problems. Gas prices are through the roof. And I'm speaking just about America, but really throughout the world, people are having economic problems, a lot of unemployment, etc., etc. So we understand when people cannot give, and we never bother people to do so. So as I always have to repeat, if you are not in a position to become a member, please do not worry about it in any way, shape, or form. Just please offer us your prayers. Give us your moral support. But if indeed you have been inspired by what you have seen here at the live streams, all of our videos, the books that are available, if you participate in our Discord forum, etc., and we have hundreds of people on our Discord forum, if you are a supporter of Sanatana Dharma, of my work, and of the ISDS, the best way that you can truly help is by becoming a monthly tithing member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Again, someone will put the link up soon enough. And in any case, you can simply go to our main website, dharmacentral.com. And when you're there, you just look on the menu and you'll immediately see a link for how to become a member. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month, $10 a month. You can do $100 a month. You can do, and the sky is the limit. But again, whatever is comfortable for you is what we would greatly appreciate. So again, we're having our 2-week membership drive. If you have considered becoming a member, but you haven't yet, if perhaps you were a member in the past, but you ceased to be for whatever reason, you forgot to renew your membership or something, please become a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. And in that way, you will help us with the many projects that we're working on to help to restore Dharma to this world. So I thank you for listening to my appeal. And with that, we're going to now jump into the talk for today. And again, what we're going to be talking about is the teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And without repeating things that I said the last time that we got together, this is our second session. We will most likely have a third session. I'm guessing not more than that. Probably just one more session, so there will be a total of 3. But without repeating things that I said the last time, let me just say Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was one of the greatest sages in the history of Sanatana Dharma. And he lived not that long ago, just about 500 years ago or so. He was a great philosopher. He was a great bhakta. He was just wonderful in so many different ways. But interestingly, as far as his writing output, unlike many other individuals, he didn't write a lot. He didn't write large books, commentaries, anything like that. Rather, he wrote just the Shikshashtakam, what is called the Shikshashtakam, which is 8 simple verses. Just 8 verses. Ashtaka means 8, Ashta means 8, and Shiksha means instructions. So these are the 8 instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And again, this is the only thing he wrote. As great a sage as he was, he condensed the essence of not just his teachings philosophically, that also, but more importantly, he condensed the very essence of his mood as a bhakta in these 8 amazing verses. The last time we went through the first 3 of these verses, I believe, and now we're going to go through another 3 of these verses. And again, these verses are truly remarkable. When you read these 8 verses, what you experience is the very essence of bhakti, the very essence of what it means to be an individual practicing bhakti yoga, very specifically. So you'll see several themes that are here throughout the totality of these 8 verses. I talked about some of these themes the last time, but you will continue to see these themes. There are several themes, but the 2 most important of which are taking shelter of the names of God, number 1, and number 2, humility. Humility. And what's amazing is with the humility part, it's not merely that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offers teachings on humility, talks about how to be humble. No. What is so beautiful and so poetic, so aesthetically wondrous about these 8 verses is that it is in how he expresses himself that his humility comes through the page to you and touches you. That's how he teaches you humility with these 8 verses. Again, not lecturing, oh, this is what it means to be humble, you do this and you do that. No. Rather, he writes in such a humble way that it touches your heart. So these are truly astounding verses. So with that, let's continue with our exploration of the Shikshashtakam. And we will go through, like I said, 3 verses today. We'll start with verse 4 of the Shikshashtakam. And verse 4 proceeds in this way. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. So right here alone, again, we see this, we see an example of what I was talking about a moment ago, this humility that is there in the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And indeed, what by extension should be the mood of any serious spiritual practitioner. I'm going to just talk about this for a moment because no one else does, sadly. And I've commented on that, how no one else does. The idea of humility is something in which when you explore true, authentic, meaning ancient, meaning traditional spirituality, and interestingly in several traditions, not just Sanatana Dharma. You see this certainly in Buddhism as well. You see this in Jainism. You see this even among Christian mystics to some degree, etc. You see the importance that is placed upon, indeed, the idea of humility, the idea of knowing our place before God and knowing that we are truly the finite facing the infinite. And what does that mean? What does that feel like to our soul? You see this again and again in traditional spirituality. This is one of the hallmarks by which we can know what is true spirituality versus what is made up, concocted, commercialized, new age nonsense. Is that when you watch any of the videos, the lectures, the talks, you read any of the books, etc., you go to the seminars, etc., of any new age spiritual so-called teachers, humility is a word, is a concept, is a mood that you will never see come from them in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. On the contrary, they have egotism, couched in spirituality, but they have egotism. Well, that is not real spirituality. New age spirituality in which you are in love with yourself. And me first, including supposedly even spiritually. No, in actuality, what we have seen is that, again, real spirituality, meaning traditional spirituality, does indeed focus on the importance of humility. And why is this the case? Well, humility is the very opposite motion of the motion that brought us here to begin with. In other words, we are in illusion. Human beings, living beings, are in illusion. Why are we in illusion? Because we thought too much of ourselves, because we had spiritual hubris, because rather than wanting to serve God, we thought that we were God. As a result, we developed ahankara, false ego, and we fell into illusion. That's our problem, spiritually speaking. What is the very opposite of that? What is the very opposite motion, spiritually, one could say, of that problem? It is to exercise the very opposite mood of humility, of understanding that, oh, I have my talents. Yes, I know. I'm not foolish about myself. Yes, oh, I have this talent. I have that talent. Yes, I'm pretty intelligent. I'm pretty this and that, and that's nice. But I also understand who I am, again, in the face of God. in encountering the infinite, I understand that in actuality, the infinite is just that. And in the face of the infinite, I am non-existent. Not in actuality, of course. Yes, I have my existence. But we understand that when we are faced with God, how many of you have encountered a mountain? I have. How many of you have encountered a mountain that's so massive that as you're driving toward it, you're 70 miles away and you see the mountain in front of you, and you're driving for 15 minutes toward it, and you've been driving for 15 minutes at, let's say 60 miles an hour, and it seems like the size of the mountain hasn't even increased. It's so big. It seems like this mountain is so large that you're driving toward it quickly, and it doesn't even seem like you're getting close to it. That's how big the mountain is. I've had that experience. What to speak of then finally being there at the mountain, and you realize how big that mountain truly is. An infinite number of mountains cannot compare to the grandeur of Sriman Narayana. What is humility? Simply to realize that. Simply to realize that. All that being said, now let's actually look at this verse. So again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is directly addressing God. So thus he says, "O Almighty Lord." And that is who God is. Again, think of that massive mountain. Think of an infinite number of such mountains. An infinite number of such mountains pales into insignificance compared to God. So thus, very correctly, he says, "O Almighty Lord." And now he describes his inner state. And he does so, again, very humbly and very honestly. He says, "I have no desire to accumulate wealth." Now, as we go through this list, please keep in mind, are you a spiritual practitioner? If you are, everything that Mahaprabhu is saying here, this should also be your mood. So thus, I have no desire to accumulate wealth. For an individual who is a serious spiritual practitioner, for an individual who is a yogi, who is a bhakta, we understand the value of money. You see, we're not stupid. I understand that a $1,000 bill is different from a $1 bill. I understand that. The yogi understands that. But at the same time, you're not motivated by money. You're not motivated by the accumulation of wealth in any way whatsoever. It's actually been said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, other places, that when a sage looks upon a piece of gold, it's like they're looking upon a rock. It's like they're looking upon something that's not gold, that has no value. Now, what does that mean? Again, they understand the difference. But as far as that greed element that is there within most human beings, it does not exist within the sage. It does not exist within the true spiritual practitioner. So this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying here. I have no desire to accumulate wealth. But then he goes on, nor do I desire beautiful women. Now keep in mind, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a man, so of course he speaks about women. This applies to women also. If you are a woman spiritual practitioner, then your desire should not be simply the opposite sex, the opposite sex. That's all that he's saying here, is that this should not be forefront in your mind. Oh, it is not only fine, it is dharmic to indeed find a partner, find someone of the opposite sex, to get married, etc., etc. But the point is that that should not be your all in all. That should not be your reason for being. So thus, he does not desire beautiful women. So meaning that beautiful women, for him, what is more important is knowing God. What is more important is focusing on Narayana, on Krishna, not merely chasing women, not merely chasing the opposite sex, which seems to be a tremendous part of our culture today. Tremendous part of our culture today is based upon chasing the opposite sex. And it's an amazing thing, actually. The more of a chase there is, we've seen, the more miserable people are. Rather, what we need to understand is that, again, while we should seek a perfect partner, someone who is wonderful for us, and seek to have married life, etc., etc., that in and of itself, alone, without God, does not produce happiness. But on the contrary, when you can find that perfect partner and you have God in the center of your marriage, in the center of your family, then you have peace, then you have happiness, then you have joy, then you have fulfillment, both materially and spiritually. And let's go on. Nor do I want any number of followers. This is an amazing statement, actually, for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to make. Because when he was alive, he had millions of followers. I've read every biography, every traditional biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya Bhagavata, many smaller biographies that were written up to 150 years after he left the planet. And it's an amazing thing how he was indeed a very important guru, a very, very important sage, a very important saint, to the point where he had followers really all throughout India, but especially Bengal, Orissa, and the Vrindavana, Mathura area. And as a result of this, it is an amazing thing for him to say this, that he actually doesn't really want followers. This, interestingly, is actually the mood of a true devotee. Oh, they have followers. Again, Chaitanya had millions. Ramanuja had so many followers. Prabhupada had tens, hundreds of thousands. All these great sages, they will have followers. That is something that is inevitable. But again, like with the other things we were talking about, wealth or the opposite sex, etc., is it their primary motivation for living, for doing what they do? Absolutely not. Rather, when it comes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu making this statement that he does not wish to accumulate followers, what is he saying? That for the true guru to have followers is something that is a duty for them. It's not something that they want. And more, it's not something that they need. It's not something that they seek. What a true guru seeks to do is to save the world. And what that means is saving multiple individuals, as many as possible. So by default, they have followers, but they're not motivated by having followers. If they don't have followers for whatever reason, and it's God's will, then they're fine with that. Then they are simply in solitude. Now let's go on. And I want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. This last sentence is actually more profound than maybe most people can understand. Because again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was not just anybody. He was a sage, he was a philosopher, he was a yogi, he was a bhakta, he was someone who, you want to call him a spiritual practitioner, that would be stating it very lightly. So that being the case, one would think that his goal would certainly be liberation. That is the goal for any spiritual practitioner, isn't it? Well, yes. Yes, indeed it is. That's a given, however, for the bhakta. For the individual who is a devotee, that liberation will be there is, again, just a given. That liberation will happen is simply a given. But what is fascinating here, what is amazing, is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not even saying something to the effect of, "Oh Krishna, through my devotional service, please give me liberation." It's an amazing thing that he doesn't say this. Rather, what does he say? Birth after birth. In other words, he is saying that liberation, yes, that would be nice. That's of secondary concern. Even that is of secondary concern to me. Even liberation is of secondary concern to me. That thing that every yogi, every Vedantist, every sage wants. Mahaprabhu says, liberation? Yeah, okay. That's of secondary concern. Even if I have to reincarnate again and again, birth after birth, what I ask for is that I can serve you with devotion. What an amazing statement. That is the mood of the Vaishnava. When we hear this word Vaishnava, and people understand what that, or misunderstand what that word means by looking it up on Wikipedia or some silly place like that. Oh, it's one of the sects of Hinduism. No. What does it mean to be a Vaishnava? This one sentence tells us. A Vaishnava is an individual for whom even liberation is secondary. What does the Vaishnava desire? Simply to serve God with devotion. And if God even wants me to reincarnate again and again, that's fine. If God wants me to be liberated, that's fine. God, you want me to be liberated? That's your desire? Oh, I'll be liberated. You want me to come back to this world? Oh, I'll come back to this world. The only thing that matters to me is that I am serving you, and that I am serving you with absolute devotion. So again, profound statement by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, that being said, let's go to the next verse of the Shikshashtakam, and that is verse 5. And it proceeds in this way. O son of Maharaja Nanda, that is Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Truly amazing. Again, I'm just going to keep repeating this about all these verses. Beautiful and amazing. So first of all, again, indeed, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is addressing Krishna himself, the son of Nanda Maharaja. And he continues with the same thought of being a servant of God, of serving God with devotion. And he says to Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. This is his identity. This, again, is the identity of the Vaishnava. Again, a Vaishnava is not a follower of one of the sects of Hinduism. A Vaishnava is someone whose only desire is to serve God, and they see themselves as a servant of God. That's a Vaishnava. So thus, being a Vaishnava, a true Vaishnava, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu states this identity. This identity statement is here. I am your eternal servitor, O Krishna. This is how we are to see ourselves, that we are here to serve God. What does it mean to serve? You see, in our radical egalitarian crypto-Marxist age of envy that we live in today, the idea of being a servant is something that we're trained to reject. Servant? Servant of someone else? Servant of someone even greater? Servant even of God? That's so denigrating. Well, that's a very, very modern idea. The idea, of course, in actuality is that, no, we're not just serving anyone. We are serving, again, that being compared to who an infinite number of mountains seems like nothing. This is who we are meant to serve, is that being who is the source of our being. So this is our true identity, that we are meant to be servants of God. You know, there are some memes that have gone around quoting me, where the memes say, and there are several of them, you are not God, you are a servant of God. Well, this is what the Vaishnava understands, that indeed this is our position in reality, that we are meant to serve God, and to serve God is the greatest of privileges. Now, that being said, let's go on. That was just one clause of the sentence. Now again, with the rest, we again see the humility of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says about himself, yet somehow or other, that is, being your servant, yet somehow or other, I have fallen into this ocean of repeated birth and death. So again, he is speaking about himself, but in actuality, this applies to most, if not all, beings who are within this material world. That beings, as I said just a short time ago, just 5 minutes ago or so, due to ego, due to illusion, beings fall within this material world, and in that illusion, they repeatedly undergo reincarnation, birth and death, birth and death. So it's described here by Chaitanya as an ocean of birth and death. So he's explaining what is the position of the vast majority of Jivatmans. Jivatmans are very specifically Atmans who have fallen within the material world. And rather than being pure consciousness itself, they are consciousness exhibited as life force within the context of materiality. That's the definition of Jivatman versus merely Atman. So, all that being said, this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining here. That somehow or other, I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. But now he makes this plea. He He says, please pick me up from this ocean of death. Let's stop there for a moment. So in understanding that even when it comes to salvation, even when it comes to liberation, ultimately it is by the grace of God that we have liberation. So thus he's making this very clear that you, God, please pick me up from this ocean of birth and death. Because what power do I have? Oh, I have some power, but ultimately it's by your grace alone that I can have salvation, that I can be freed from this terrible ocean of happiness and suffering, this terrible place that is here. So please pick me up from this ocean of death, he says. And now the most profound statement imaginable. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this great sage, says, and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Talk about humility. Talk about humility. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his ultimate goal is not merely liberation. His ultimate goal is to serve God. His ultimate goal is not even to serve God in some grandiose sort of way. Oh yes, Lord, let me serve you by being a general in your army. No. Let me be an atom placed near your divine lotus feet. Not even a flower. Not even a lotus petal. Not even a blade of grass. Let me be an atom of a blade of grass situated near your feet. And I will have everything that I desire. Talk about humility. This is the sort of humility that we must have if we are going to be serious spiritual practitioners. I'll state this very bluntly, and very sadly, but bluntly, but also boldly. If you are watching this right now and you think you are a spiritual person, you think that you are a spiritual practitioner, seeker, etc., forget about a spiritual teacher. If you think you're spiritual in any way and you do not understand the importance of humility, you're wasting your life. You will simply be one more of these millions of individuals who pretended to be spiritual and have been forgotten by history, however great you think you are, however much you think you have accumulated in spiritual experience or wisdom, how many Wikipedia articles you've read about religion. If you don't understand the nature of humility and how it's not just a concept, it's a lifestyle, it's a mood, it's something that has to come from deep within us. This sort of mood that we're reading of here, explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if you don't understand this, become a baker, please. Become a cobbler. Do something else. Don't pretend to be spiritual or that you know something or anything about spirituality if you cannot appreciate the importance, the crucial importance of humility. This is what Chaitanya is trying to explain to us. That all of us have talents. We've all read books. I have 3,000. We all have books. We've all read books. We all have different degrees and this and that. And yes, I've meditated for a full year now. etc. We all have things that are claims of fame. But if you do not have this sort of humility by which you can hurl your existence at the feet of God and simply surrender your existence, surrender your being at the feet of God with this attitude of I am yours, I am yours, I am yours alone. If you can't do that, don't play with spirituality. Because this is what it means to be spiritual. This radical a dedication, this radical a commitment, this radical an honesty about who you are and what you truly want. This is what it means to be a truly spiritual person. This is what the International Sanatana Dharma Society is and teaches. This is what I teach. This is what all my students yearn for and work toward. is to develop exactly this mood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking of here. And with that, one more verse we're going to look at. Shikshashtakam and 6. This is verse 6. And again, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking directly to Krishna, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. And he says again, O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? You understand what these verses, this Shikshashtakam, are doing. Many people have commented on these verses. Quite a few people have commented on these verses. And they often will try to comment on these verses in a very philosophical way, as philosophical as they can be, etc., from various angles, from even a sectarian angle once in a while. In actuality, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is doing here, again, is explaining perfectly the heart of the Vaishnava. The heart of the Vaishnava. So let's go through this. Again, O my Lord. So Mahaprabhu is speaking very specifically to Krishna. When will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? That is the nature of love. That is the nature of relief. That is the nature of experiencing finally that which our heart has been yearning for and searching for, not just in this lifetime, but lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Can you remember your last life? Probably not. Some people will pretend, probably not. Can you remember all your lifetimes? Definitely not. Some people can. Those are liberated beings. But this is the amazing thing. We're talking about not just this one lifetime, but that which your heart has been yearning for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Even as on the conscious level, you are seeking, you are chasing after the illusions of this world. Deep within, your Atman itself is yearning for all of the nonsense to stop, for all the illusion to stop, and to finally come to this stage of what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking of, when you can sit in meditation and recite the names of God, recite the names of Krishna, of Sriman Narayana, and with tremendous love, with tremendous relief, simply have tears of joy coming from your eyes, falling onto your chest and onto the ground beneath you. So amazing that first, he is describing this, but B, he is, again, in humility, describing himself as someone who is not experiencing this. You see, he is. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did experience everything that will be spoken about in this verse, but in his humility, he doesn't think so. He thinks he's insincere. That's humility. And yet he was someone who, he was famous for having all of these ecstatic symptoms that are going to be described here. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had all of these symptoms. This is written about in all his biographies, and yet in his humility, he's saying, when will I experience, when will I truly experience these tears of love coming from my eyes when I recite the names of God? And now let's go on. When will my voice choke up? You know, we've experienced this before. When we are experiencing a certain state, and it could be a state of tremendous love, it can be a state that is arising from something deep within that is indescribable, where your voice just chokes up and you can't talk. And when will my hairs, the hairs of my body, stand on end? Some people have experienced that sometimes. You'll have an experience so profound that you'll feel like your hairs are standing up. Well, imagine that happening because you are experiencing God and the love of God. When will all these things happen? At the recitation of your name. Indeed, this is what the Vaishnava seeks. The Vaishnava seeks not just these symptoms in and of themselves. The symptoms are secondary. What causes the symptoms is what is of importance, and that is a love that is so deep, a love that is so infinite, a love that is so indescribable, a love that is so ecstatic, to the point where even for that individual who is a perfect yogi and has absolute self-mastery, who has absolute control over themselves, this state is so strong that it becomes manifest externally and they cannot even help it. Even that yogi who has complete mastery over themselves. So this is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining. This is the goal of life, actually, is to experience such a love of God. So, Shikshashtakam, the 8 instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We will stop here for now. We have 2 more verses to look at, verses 7 and 8. We'll do that the next time that we come together, which, God willing, will be next Monday. And with that, I thank you all very much for being here and listening to my brief commentary, very brief, upon these sacred verses of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And at this point, if you have any questions about either anything that we have discussed or about Sanatana Dharma, if you have sincere questions, now is the time to please ask. I'll do my best with the time that we have to try to answer as many questions as I can. Let me actually, before I answer any actual questions, let me just say, because I've seen both Frankie and Jesse here making very nice comments, let me just say that I received the wonderful donation of incense that you sent today. Actually, it was waiting for me on the doorstep. So thank you so much for that donation of incense to the temple. It's very much needed. For people who don't know, you can imagine, if you know anything about Vedic or Hindu temples, we go through a lot of incense, more than you would imagine, actually. So any donations of incense are very much appreciated. So thank you very much for that. So with that, there are several questions here. First of all, Varsaga, Namaste, is there a difference between compassion and love? Yes, compassion is a manifestation of love. So there is indeed a distinction between the two. You know, love, in fact, let me go a little bit deeper into this actually, because it's an important topic. I've said this before. I've bemoaned the fact that in the English language, which I love actually, English is my first language. I love English actually. If you understand English well, it's actually a very good vehicle for expression. However, one of my pet peeves is that in the English language, there is one word, love. And love can apply to anything, from love of God to love of ice cream to love of this, love of that. And you just use one word. You know, in Greek, I believe there are 7 words. In Sanskrit, forget about it, as we say in Brooklyn. My students are very happy that I said that. I'm a Brooklyn Italian, so I had to get that out. In Sanskrit, there are so many ways of saying love that it is amazing. Certainly there's bhakti, there's bhava, there's prema. There are just so many different ways in which we can express the idea of love. But then again, there are different kinds of love. So speaking about love, speaking first of all, very generally, yes, love is the general concept and the general experience of having affection toward either a being or multiple beings. How that is often expressed is in different ways, one of which is compassion. You see, compassion is not compassion unless love is involved. So this is why some government bureaucrat giving someone a welfare check who they don't even know That's not compassion. They don't even know. They know the name of the person because they have to put it on the check. Otherwise, they don't know that person. It's just a 9 to 5 or, well, government bureaucrat. It's like a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. job, etc., etc. That's not love. That's not compassion. But on the other hand, if you have an individual who they are giving to another, not because it's their job, but because they truly have empathy, they truly have a love for humanity, a love for the other, etc. And as a result, they then extend their hand willingly to help an individual or multiple individuals. That's compassion proper. Now, with that understanding, again, compassion, empathy, these things are themselves manifestations of love. That's generally speaking. But now, spiritually speaking, when we speak of love, of course, we are talking about first and foremost, indeed, bhakti prema, that is love toward God, which then is the motivator for every other sort of love that we experience in our life. And that means love for other. That means love for Mother Earth. That means love for all living beings. That means love certainly for those who are close to us, etc., etc. That being the case, the individual who is experiencing spiritual love, i.e. bhakti, for that person, they also manifest that love in the form of compassion. But even then, it's a very different form of compassion from even, let's say, the nice, well-motivated person giving $1 to a homeless person. For the spiritual person, their compassion is manifest in this way, that they wish to help to benefit others in the deepest way imaginable, i.e. spiritually. So for a truly spiritual person, their compassion is manifest in trying to help others to know themselves, to understand the meaning of life, to do practices that will help them to elevate themselves spiritually, etc., etc. So maybe I went too deeply into this, but it was an important topic. I hope we see now the difference between compassion and love, but also the different sorts of love and the different sorts of compassion. Very good. So with that, if you please give me a few moments, I'm going to see what other questions there are. Very nice. Here is a good question from Michael Maldonado. And first of all, Michael, namaste. It's very good to see you here again. And the question is, namaste, Sri Acharyaji. Do those who have realized impersonal Brahman ever go further to realize the personality of God? Or do they not go further than the impersonal energies of God? Thank you. Very good question. And the answer is yes, they can. They can. And indeed, throughout history, there have been stories, indeed, of individuals who did go further. So individuals who did become liberated beings, they had Brahman realization, but then not being satisfied merely with that, in one way or another, they learned about bhakti. They either encounter a truly Vaishnava sage, or in some way or another, they realize that, Brahman realization, that is this realization of God in this impersonal, Advaitic sense. Yes, I have peace now, but there's a nectar that is missing for my existence. And they then go on to become personalists rather than impersonalists. And they come to the point of, indeed, wanting to develop bhakti. So indeed, there are many sages, both historically and throughout the Vedic scriptures, for whom this was the case. So they do indeed go further. Not all of them do, but some can. So I hope that answers the question. Very nice. Very nice comment from Nick. Humility is a beautiful trait. I see more and more in those flocking to the ISDS and our satsanghas. Sanatana Dharma Jaya. Absolutely. Absolutely. And very nice comment. The reason why I wanted to read this comment specifically, even though it's not really a question, is because this is indeed the case. Indeed, this is one of hundreds of things that you'll see that make the International Sanatana Dharma Society radically different from other even Vedically inspired organizations or sects or this or that or whatever. And again, there are hundreds of things that make us different, but this is also one of them. For those of you who are new and who do not know this, and again, you must have sincerity. If you don't have sincerity, you'll accomplish nothing with the ISDS, I can guarantee you of that. If you are sincere, I would ask you to join our Discord server and to begin to associate with our devotees. And this is one thing that you will see. Many of them are brilliant, more than you can imagine. We have many individuals who literally have PhDs. We have people who are MDs. We have people who are highly educated in so many different ways. But the common thread among all our devotees is their deep humility. Their very deep humility. That when you approach them and you ask questions sincerely, they will answer you with tremendous humility. They will extend a hand to help you to understand Sanatana Dharma more and more. And again, in a very authentic, very sincere sort of way. So, thank you for saying that, Nick. It's very true. Our students of the ISDS are the most wonderful people on the face of the earth. And I don't say that lightly. Very nice. Again, these days I seem to be reading a lot of comments. I will get to questions too in a moment, but I just need to read this because Berserker has asked over many weeks and months. He's asked many very good questions, actually. In fact, just yesterday, we had a invitation-only Q&A session, live stream, actually. It's only for members. Another reason to become a member of the ISDS. And Berserker was there. He asked many good questions. I think I answered 3 or 4 of his questions. He says, Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. I just wanted to use this time to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you've done. Your guidance is of tremendous value to me. May you have good health. Thank you so much for that wonderful, wonderful comment. I truly appreciate it. And again, I could do nothing without the well wishes of my wonderful students and disciples. Here's a very interesting, very good question. Snufkin, I believe is the name. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. Namaste Acharyaji, are warriors that are taken to Svarga later reincarnated, or do they stay there for eternity? Thank you for the wonderful talk. Thank you for your question and your very nice comment. No, they are not there eternally, actually. Even a very brave warrior, they're still within this material world. They still have the karmic implications that are there in the fabric of their life within this material world. And they still have their illusions. They still have their problems, however brave they may have been. And that being the case, it is indeed because of the fact that they died bravely upon the battlefield that they then went to Svarga. But that's not for eternity. They do eventually reincarnate again, and they can reincarnate in a variety of ways, as is true for any of us. Being even within the heavenly realm, you have free choice. So once there, a person can choose to just live their life just enjoying all the pleasures of the heavenly realm until eventually that good karma runs out and then you become human again. Or you can choose, if you're in the heavenly realm, to indeed be even more spiritual, to be a yogi, etc., and to continue to ascend toward the truly spiritual realm. So this is true for brave warriors who died on the battlefield as well. They will find themselves in Svarga, in the heavenly realm, but they will move on eventually. As far as where they move on to, that is up to their free will, just as is true for us as well. So very good question. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, we have a little bit more time, so please give me a moment. Very good. Here's a nice question that's very easy to answer that I will answer, and it's from Wise Sage. Namaste Acharyaji. Why did Jaya and Vijaya become reincarnated in the material world even though they were fully liberated beings? Krishna said that those who achieve Vaikuntha never fall down. Yes, that is a good question, and it's a question that's been asked many, many times, and for which there is one true answer to explain this. Jaya and Vijaya are the guardians of the gates to Vaikuntha. Thus, they are situated outside Vaikuntha. That's how they could fall down. Because it is quite true. Krishna says this in Bhagavad Gita, but it's actually said in many places throughout the Vedic scriptures. And the wording is important. When you have achieved Vaikuntha, i.e. you are in Vaikuntha, you do not fall down. Jaya and Vijaya, on the other hand, and when you read their story, it makes this extremely clear. They were not within Vaikuntha. They were guardians at the gate. So they were outside of the gates of Vaikuntha. This is how they could fall down. They were not in Vaikuntha. That's the first thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that this was God's blessing upon them, because again and again, through several stages of reincarnation, they engaged in Leela. They engaged in personal relationship and activities, even if as villains. Still, they had that personal association with God and several avatars. That being the case, it was a great blessing. God decided that, yes, I need individuals who can serve as the villains, as these great asuras, as Ravana, as Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, etc., etc. And that being the case, he chose to give his blessings to Jaya and Vijaya, that again and again they could engage in Leela with God. So that is the answer to that. But yes, once you're in Vaikuntha, you do not fall down in any way, shape, or form, but they were not in Vaikuntha. And that's what the scriptures make indeed very clear. Very good. Now, here's an interesting question from Love Conqueror. Namaste, Acharyaji. A question from a fellow Vaishnava who could not make it. Why is it that the Sri Sampradaya of Ramanuja Acharya has little influence in the West compared to Gaudiya? Let me give you the actual answer to this, actually. The reason why is because Prabhupada was very, very dear to Krishna. And Krishna wanted to give the mission of bringing Vaishnavism to Prabhupada. That is the reason why. Because Prabhupada was very dear to Krishna. And Krishna wanted to give that mission to him. And he was a Gaudiya Vaishnava. Now, the second part, as far as the Sri Sampradaya of Ramanuja Acharya not having tremendous influence in the Western world, the International Sanatana Dharma Society is changing that. To the point where indeed, and I say this very humbly, the teachings of Sri Ramanuja Acharya, known as Vishishta-Advaita, is going to become the predominant form of Vaishnavism throughout the length and breadth of our planet in the future. Sri Vaishnavism is the future of Vaishnavism, as it has been the past of Vaishnavism all along. It is the first of Vaishnavisms, and it will be the future of Vaishnavism. Very good. Please give me a moment. We're already at the top of the hour, but I want to see if perhaps there's another question I can answer very, very quickly. Very good. I'm going to answer this question because A, it can be answered very, very quickly, and B, because I have personal experience with this, and I'll explain what I mean. This is from Vedic Heartland. Namaskar, Acharyaji. Excuse this very specific question, as this is my only chance to ask you. Is it okay to recite mantras in between sets when working out? Thank you, and Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Well, what is interesting is I was working out. I was in the gym about 2 hours ago, actually. And, I had stopped for a little while just due to an injury that had nothing to do with working out, interestingly. It had to do with shoveling snow at one point when there was 10 inches of snow, and I did it for an hour and a half. So I had to take a little break from working out. But I'm at the gym again, lifting weights. So I was actually doing this myself, again, maybe 2.5 hours ago, 3 hours, something like that. And let me give you the answer in this way. Well, that's what I was doing in between sets. So it is absolutely wonderfully good to recite mantra in your mind. You can say it out loud. The other weightlifters might look at you a little oddly. In my case, I was saying in my mind. But yes, it's absolutely wonderful. If you're going to the gym, what a wonderful way to transcendentalize your workout. Go there, lift those weights, take your break, and then sit there and just recite within your mind, Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, and then lift more. So yes, I would encourage you to do that by all means. Very good. So with that, it's already a little bit past the hour, so sadly we're going to have to stop there. I'm sure there are many more questions, but we will do this again next Monday. And if I haven't gotten to your question now, hopefully I will then, or at some point in the future. Again, I want to thank you all very much for being here and for going through these truly profound verses with me of the Shikshashtakam, these 8 instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This has been something that has been a true joy for myself, actually. Maybe you can tell. But I love going through these verses. I can't tell you how many times I have gone through them, to the point where I have several of these verses memorized in the Sanskrit. And again, I thank you for being here. Please join us again. And just to remind you, and forgive me for doing so, but this is our 2-week membership drive. For 2 weeks we're doing this. Please become a member of the International Sanatana Dharma Society if you can. If you can help us in that way by becoming a monthly tither, by tithing every month to the ISDS, that is something that will help us tremendously with all the work that we're doing. As I explained just a little while ago, just our incense bill alone is enormous. So we need help. We truly do need help. Please become a member of the ISDS if you have not done so already. And in that way you will be helping to sustain and to restore Dharma to this world, and to take this message that you heard today to the entire world, which is exactly what we in the ISDS are doing. So with that, I ask you to please join us again next time that we get together. And Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Jaya Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Suravangsha Jayate. International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma. Evam bhavatu. May it be so. And with that, everyone, until the next time that we come together in this sacred gathering known as the ISDS Livestream Satsangha, I ask you all in every way, please take very good care of yourselves.